Right, what have we got today? Boosh, well, it's yet another keychain light. I feel like I'm literally being bombarded with lights, and I'll show you here. I feel like I'm literally being bombarded with lights which look like this. All this sort of style. So what we're looking at today is the Astrolux K2, and it shares a lot in line with the methodology and certainly the look of these lights. If you remember going way back, the Rovi Von was the one that sort of kicked it off and popularised this design. And then if you remember, I did a review of the Tiki, which I really liked, even though I thought I wasn't going to like it because I thought it would just be a knockoff. And then there was the Jetbeam, which was much brighter than the Tiki, although the Tiki tends to throw a bit further, even though when I said that, it annoyed people who've bought the mini one. But sorry, that's what I'm seeing in the data that I'm collecting. And then there was the X-Star T1, which was a little bit tougher cased, but very similar in a lot of respects. But anyway, let's get on with what we're supposed to be looking at, and I'll compare those at a later time in this review. Okay. So this is the Astrolux K2, and it is running on a SST20 LED or emitter, if you wish to call it that. So it should give you a little bit of throw. It's got a lot in common with something like the Tiki, which you get quite a bit of throw. You might not get as many lumens as some of the other lights. If you remember, the mini one has more lumens than these. I mean, these run at about 300. This one in itself runs at 300 lumens. The box is very similar, no matter which model you get, because there's two models with two different tints, and there's different colours. So I'll quickly go over why this has 4000K on mine. You can get this in two tints, so you can get this at 4000K, which is a very yellowy light. In other words, it's very similar to a sunny daylight. It's got that warm tint to it. Some people like that, some don't. I do. I find it gives you a little bit less backscatter. It's slightly better on reflective surfaces, slightly, and I think it just looks more natural. Whereas if you didn't want that, it's brilliant to see that they've actually, unlike a lot of the other lights, they've actually given you the option here. You can get the tint that you require. So it does also come in a 6500 Kelvin. So in other words, whereas this is a very yellowy and very warm, you can get a whiter light, which will I mean, usually it does anyway, especially at this level. It will appear lighter, like you're getting more lumens, even though you want. It's still 300 lumens max on the highest setting. So you can see on the box there, it says 300 lumens. Not a lot on here, it just says multi-purpose EDC keychain, a flashlight. I don't want to belabor the point here, but if you want to pause it, this is in 4K, so you can zoom in and fulfill all your destiny there, reading all of that if you've got nothing better to do. But I will cover all of this in the in the review, so we'll have a look. Max charging rate 250, but I'll cover that as well. So let's get it out the box because it's boring. Unboxings are particularly dull, aren't they? You want to actually see the item. So let's have a close look at it here. So here's the item here, very similar to the other designs. They're basically the same. I've noticed it's slightly larger than the other ones, and I just wanted to point that out. So if we compare that, see the Tiki and the mini one, very, very, very similar, not just in looks, but in dimensions. But then if you compare it, look, this is slightly bigger. Look, I'll try and line it up. It's just ever so slightly bigger, and wider and longer. Slightly though. It's certainly not a massive issue anyway, and they all use a TIR setup here. So in other words, there's a piece of plastic here which has total internal refraction. In other words, the light bounces around and leaves how they dictate depending on the design of this, so you get a little bit of a hot spot. In fact, hang on, there you go. If we zoom in there, you can see that in the middle they have like a central core which just allows the emitter to fire its light out and give you a little bit of a hot spot, and then on the surrounding area it tries to spread that out a little bit. So we'll zoom back out again there. Okay, so like I say, TIR, and in regards to that, I'll just quickly cover that for people who need to know, because I know it annoys people, and I'm not going to do little drawings because that really winds people up and they get overheated. But generally, you'll have the traditional smooth reflector, where you have the LED and then surrounding it you have a smooth reflector to try and give you a little bit of throw. So we'll show you what that looks like. Beam profile wise, yes, you get a lot of distance, but look, you get this hot spot. There's your spill. You're trying to get a bit of distance here. This is probably not a good example because it's rather wide. This is quite a wide setup here, but in general you're trying to get distance, but you get this irritating issue up front. I mean, I haven't even got this on a high setting. This is just medium, and already you can see it's starting to slightly obscure detail. One way around that is to use something like an orange peel reflector. I've got that on this workhorse. I haven't even got around to doing a review on this yet, but I will try and get onto that because it's got a Samsung emitter. But as you can see, what happens is it's slightly obscuring detail, but can you see how it's less? It's mitigated that to a degree anyway. And the reason it's done that is because it's using orange peel reflector. See how it's very bumpy. Now this gives you, hopefully anyway, the best of both worlds. It gives you a little bit of throw, and it also mitigates the fact that you get detail obscuration, or whatever you want to call it. Really, it does work to a degree, but it's still a mid-range light. And if you're working up close, you really want a TIR which spreads the light and gives you a nice diffuse beam. So as you can see on this one here, very diffuse. There's something of a hot spot there, but it's quite wide and it diffuses out. There's no particular pattern there, is there? So, and I'll show you with the K2. So here's the K2, and we'll turn it on there. So can you see? Now on this one, you can see, and I'll move it around. It's hard to see on camera. If I move it up and down this T here, can you see there's a hot spot there, about there? And it's moving. So that's that central core. Now because of that, you get a little bit of throw on this. It was okay. I'll show you some beam shots in a moment, because I think it did a decent job for throw anyway. In fact, we'll do that now. So I'll just put that down. So we'll put that down for a second. So I'll bring a picture up here. So here's a beam shot I did. Now this is at close range, obviously. So close range, just to show you, because we've discussed tints and things like that. And as you can see, you've got, you know, if you look at the top left there, you've got the Astrolux, which I tested. Now this is the K2, so pretty good, but can you see there's a bit of a hot spot there, and then as you venture off to the right hand side of that image, you're losing a bit of light there. There is some light there, trust me. When I took that, I was able to see that section of grass there, but it was greatly diminished. If you compare that to the shot next to it, which is the Jetbeam, that's the Jetbeam mini one, which I showed you just before there. Can you see how that grass is a lot easier to see, and especially top right hand corner, you're able to see that shrubbery there as well. So this K2 seems to concentrate the light a bit. Also, you've got to remember that the Jetbeam is producing a lot more lumens, so that accounts for that as well. And then if you look at the Rovi one, I think that does an okay, decent job. It's like a mix between the two of them, between the Astrolux K2 and the Jetbeam mini one. And then you can look at the X-Star bottom left and the Tiki. I would argue on looks, and I was there when I took these images, what I would say is the Tiki and the Astrolux are the closest to how it actually looked. I think between the Astrolux K2 and the Jetbeam, sorry, the Nightcore Tiki, colour-wise is probably the most accurate representation. Even though they're slightly different tints, the Tiki is a more whiter tint and the K2 here is a 4000K. But you have that option. You can get a 6500K if you really wanted to. So we'll take them away there. Okay, right. So in regards to that, I want to go over some specs, because as this is using the SST20, this comes with a CRI 90%. So you're thinking, okay, what on earth is you rabbiting on about now? Okay, so the LED in this is producing light which has a colour rendering index of around 90. In other words, most of these lights, you'll find that they have a colour rendering index of around, it's something about 70. So you're getting, in regards to a colour gamut, it's only been able to show and represent about 70% of what you would see from natural light. Whereas this is much closer, it's 90%. And it certainly is more pleasant to look at things. When you're looking at things with a lot of different colours and colour gradations as well, it's more pleasant on the eyes. If you're still wondering what on earth I'm talking about, if you go to the far end of the spectrum, so this is a high CRI, if you were to go to the lowest CRI possible, you know, something like, if you go to like a tanning salon or something like that, or a sunbed, they have a very short wavelength of light that it's representing. In other words, UV, for example. I think it's UVB is the one that gives you suntans. But it's very uncomfortable to look at. You get this horrible purple colour cast, and it's not representative of what that item should be looking like. Obviously, the wider bandwidth of light that's hitting something, the more colour accurate it is. So I really like that on this, and it's similar in its function to the Nightcore Tiki. They both have quite a nice beam. So in regards to other specs on this, it's IP65, so IP just stands for ingress protection. So IP65 really means 6 is dust. It's dust proof as long as this is closed. This is your charging port. Nothing's going to get in here. I've tried undoing this. I can't. There doesn't seem to be any other way of getting in this other than the charging port. And it's water resistant. It's not waterproof. I just want to make that clear. It's water resistant. And to be water resistant, this has to be properly put in, okay? So if that's not put in, it's not water resistant. But to be fair, and I've argued this before, if this is a keychain light, does it really have to be fully waterproof? You know, you can go diving with it and things like that. Probably not, because you're probably not going to stick your keys under a waterfall or something like that. Okay, so moving on from the ingress protection there. This is only about 17 grams, even though it is slightly bulkier. I just want to show that it's very slightly wider and bulkier than the Tiki, the Jetbeam, and I did check it with the Rovivon. This is the A8 Aurora and the T1. Although in regards to probably the T1's slightly bigger, but it's a lot more bulky, and this is a metal design, whereas this is some sort of resin. And in regards to that, for this particular light, I mean, it does come in various colours. I'll quickly go over the colours. In fact, I'll bring up a picture here. So here's the different colours. So it comes in white and amber, and bear in mind that only the white and amber have a glow-in-the-dark feature, which I'm going to explain now. You also get like a green, a red, a purple, and a blue, and a colour which I can only describe looking like if you were to give 3 different types of bubble gum to your dog, let it chew it for 10 seconds, then spit it out, and then mould it into the shape of a light. I don't know who would want that colour, but it's there if you want it, if you like LSD or something. Okay, so let's get rid of that picture. Okay, so like I say, it will glow in the dark, and I'll just show you that. So if I take a light, let's have a look. So here's the item here. So let's subject this to a form of light. Now obviously this will be a more rapid effect if you use a UV light, okay? So but we'll just put this on for a second and then turn it off. Right, so as you can see, that now glows in the dark, and I'll prove that by putting that in a dark environment there. So handy feature, I really like it. The feature I like this for is when you come out of a light environment into a dark environment, you can quickly put your hands on it and you can see it. Also, if you've been running the light, especially the secondary modes, light leaks into here and it glows. So if you put it in your pocket, take it out within a few minutes, you can quickly see it. I really like that, although I don't think this is using some of the higher end chemicals, but they cost a lot of money. I think it's using the older style chemicals, but to be fair, it keeps the cost down. And it's the same as the Nightcore Tiki. This is the non-glow-in-the-dark, in fact, this is the glow-in-the-dark version. This glows for about the same time as that. I would say there's slightly more glow material in that than there is in the Tiki, but I think it's probably the same chemical because it doesn't last. You're looking at 10-20 minutes maximum, and it fades rapidly after the 3-4 minute mark, but it's there and it's a nice little added extra feature. Okay, so what's inside this? Well, apart from obviously you've got 3 auxiliary LEDs, hard to see, but I will show you later on. There's 3 micro USBs as well, so you've got 3 auxiliaries and then 3 auxiliary LEDs. And I like the design of this. I like the little grip. One thing I wasn't so keen on button wise, it's harder to find in the dark. I pulled it out of my pocket in the dark a few times, and then you do the thumb scrape where you go, where's the bloody button? And you scrape and you rotate, and then you think, is that it? Yes, found it eventually. I would have preferred to have either have this recessed or make the button easier to find. If we compare that just quickly to something like, you've got the Rovivon A8 here, this is the Tiki, and in fact the same can be said of the Jetbeam Mini one. All those buttons are easy to find. See how they're raised up? You find that instantly. Your thumb hits it, bang. You know exactly where it is. When this comes out of your pocket in darkness, not an issue. It's the same with all of these. So I don't know why they've chosen this design. It looks sleeker, but it's not so easy. I suppose you could do something to that button, but you're going to spoil the look of it then, which would be a shame. But other than that, I like this. Nice, it feels solid. There's no creak or strange marks on it or noises or anything, and this is pretty hefty, and I like the way that this is rather open, so it's easier to get split links and stuff. I carried this for 2 weeks. I didn't use it on a split link because I didn't have one to hand, and I used it on a keychain attachment, which was a Night Eyes, and I had no problems. And I also carried it just like this in my pocket, and I've been on, let's have a think, 3 to 4 long distance walks in the dark with this now at least. But 2 weeks, so I'm pretty au fait with it now, and all of its good points and bad points. And in regards to charging, and I'll show you that, charging port, it just flips down there, open, and it is a Type C. Thank the heavens. So at last, another light which is Type C. And I know I keep rabbiting on about this and it annoys people, but the advantage of Type C is it's omnidirectional. You can plug it in that way, or you can plug it in that way. It doesn't matter. This is becoming ubiquitous. This is the future. Please can we stop having lights? I mean, even Nightcore were guilty of it. You know, look, they put it was a micro USB. I mean, come on, we really need a new light that's coming out has to be Type C. And in regards to that, I'll show you. So we'll take my handy charger here. This is just the X-Tar. So we'll stick the, so there's the Type A connector going in there. And then we'll put the charger in here, straight in. Blue light when it's charging, and that extinguishes when it's done. So as you can see, ignore that figure there, but it runs at around 5 volts. It says 0.1 of an ampere. That hovers around 0.1 to 0.2. It's basically 200. I think it's something like 250 milliamp hours charging rate. I had no problems. It charges pretty rapidly. That's rapidly enough for something with such a small battery, because bearing in mind the cell in here is 135 milliamp hours, so it's not particularly large, but it's around the same levels as these. I think these are about 120, 125, something like that. It's all that can fit in something this small. In regards to run times and things like that, I did some basic testing and I noticed that this runs for around an hour, but bear in mind that's putting on full. So that's the highest setting. Then after about 30 seconds, it drops. Although I do want to discuss that, because I noticed on some occasions it was only getting about 24 to 27 seconds and then dropping. I don't know what that was. I don't know whether it's time-based or heat. I couldn't find a reason for that. I tested the temperature and I tried it in the cold and the hot. It just seemed to be random. It seems to drop down at around 30 seconds, but sometimes it does it before, and I can't find a reason why that might be, but it certainly works. And like I say, run times before this goes kaput, you can put it on full, it drops down to around 25% of its output, way down from the max 300s, and then it runs for about an hour, and then it just sort of splutters out, which is fine. That's not bad for a light like this. It's really enough to get you out of an emergency. You know, an hour, I think that's pretty respectable. And you do have your secondary modes as well. In regards to the light, it's a ramper, which I'll show you with the UI, but it just means you can ramp it up and ramp it down. So there's the lowest, and then click and hold and ramp it up. A ramping interface is brilliant. It allows you so much granularity in what setting you're going to use, and it's very intuitive when you hand this to someone who doesn't. If you hand this to a muggle, you don't want to say, right, press 18 times for mode 6. When you're in mode 6, you need subsection 962. Hold and press twice. We love that sort of thing. When you give these as gifts and give it to a muggle, they don't want to hear that. You know, it's like trying to learn to drive the car again. All they want to know is, how do you turn it on and off? How do you make it higher and how do you make it lower? That tends to do them. So in that regard, it's pretty simple, and I was happy with that. In regards to charging, I just want to quickly cover, it does, because I've tested, it does do C to C. So Type C, so I'll prove this, plug it in, there's Type C. And then the other end here, Type C again. So if you have a Type C to C setup, I do all over the place. Watch, click, see it charging there, and it's charging. 5 volts, around 0.1 to 0.2 amps. Brilliant. No problems. I had no problems with this sort of setup. It's great. I have the Type C in the car and the computer, C to C for laptops and all sorts of things. It works great. And also it works whilst it's charging. See, another brilliant feature. I mean, it's more of a feature I like on lights I use for camping, hiking, and things like that, where you can charge it whilst you're using it. It means there's no downtime, because if you're out camping, you can't sit in the dark like a caveman waiting for something to charge. But it's an added feature. Nice to see. So well done, Astrolux. Not only is it Type C, it's Type C to C, and you can use it whilst it's charging. Top marks. I really appreciate that, because there's so many lights which negate all these things and they annoy me a little bit. Pop that out the way. Okay, we've gone over the basics here, but what I want to do is I need to show you the UI. Okay, so UI is pretty simple. It's ramping, but as you can see from the box, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. Now, rather than me go through all this like a nerd, I'm going to just try and cover it rapidly. Okay, so if you press and hold when it's off, you can quickly get yourself to the lowest setting. So let's say that's off, press and hold, bang. That takes, I mean, I'll let it step up a little bit there, but I'll show you again. There, That's the lowest possible setting. So from off, you've quickly got the ability to go to its lowest setting, which is great. It means you're not going to ruin night vision or irritate people and things like that. And sometimes that's all you need to read a map or not give away position or not damage your night vision. There's other applications for that as well. So nice to see. To turn it on in a standard fashion, you would just press the button, turn it on, and then you'd click and hold to go up. And then that hits your maximum, which is 300. Nice and bright there, beautiful beam there, nice hot spot in the middle there. Although you could argue that that's irritating up close, but if you take that to a sensible distance, like 10 inches, not even that, it's dissipated and it's fine, and that's there. No real problems with that. And then you can go back down again just by clicking and holding, and then click for off. So that's your basic. Now, what I don't understand is you can't quickly get to maximum from off. There's no way of doing that. To get to maximum, you've got to turn it on, then you've got to double press, and then it goes to it. So to get to maximum, you would either turn it on and click and hold, or turn it on and then double press. So a bit of a shame there's no direct access, but I think the reason for that is a double click is strobe, and I'll show you that, and that has applications for safety and things like that. So strobe, 2 clicks, bang, strobe. I'll cover that because I don't want to annoy people. So nice to see that you can quickly get to strobe. If you've got an emergency, a ninja's attacking you or whatever, and we've discussed this before, a strobe is somewhat helpful in these situations, but you're probably better running off unless you're trained or you're armed. But you've got that option should you need it. Okay, so you've got 3 presses, which takes you to these auxiliary lights, and there's 3 of them. So I'll show you that. So 1, 2, 3. So that's the middle one there illuminating, and that is a UV. So I'll see if I can find something that might be UV reactive. This might be. No, that's not particularly reactive. I do have a cable. Let's have a look. That should be. I've got an old cable there. That's quite reactive. So even though this looks green, it's because the glow-in-the-dark section is illuminating. You can see it's blue. I've tried it on a few banknotes and stuff. It's okay. I do want to point out this is not as bright as, if you remember, the Jetbeam was brilliant. The secondary modes on this were fantastic. They were mega bright. Look at the difference. Look. In fact, I'll show you. That's facing the floor. You see there's a little bit of blue. Look at all that. Masses. It's going top to bottom. So I will say the Jetbeam's secondary modes are massively superior in output to this, although you could probably argue that, okay, well, the Jetbeam might be brighter, but it won't last as long. Okay, that could be fair enough. So you've got this UV if you need it. You can use it for looking for scorpions in the desert or whatever it is you want to look at there. I know there's some glues which are UV reactive. That might be helpful for things like that. Okay, so when you're in this UV mode, you can press to cycle through the secondary modes. So if we press it, it goes to the furthest away LED from the button here. Now this is a red one, and again, it's pretty bright. It's not quite as bright as the Jetbeam Mini one though. I think that does pip it at the post there. I just wanted to mention that, but it's nice, it looks decent, it's enough light for a marker or something like that. So we'll press it again and go to the other one. So that's the LED closest to the button there, and that's a blue one. I don't know what you might want to use that for, but it's there if you want it. And then you've got another mode. So this flashes, so it's red flash. So that's just the red one flashing. So pretty handy for marker situations and things like that, and giving away position. And then if we press it again, I think it's a combination. Yeah, so blue flashes, and then there's one more where I think it combines them, doesn't it? Yeah, so it flashes blue, and then it flashes red, and then it flashes blue, and then it flashes red. So everything basically, and then back to normal, back to UV. So a lot of secondary modes there, some of which you may find useful, some you may not. I know someone in the comments section when I was posting some of these modes said it looks more like a Toys R Us mode. It's ridiculous. Fair enough. We don't all live in a European rave, I suppose you can put it like that. Okay, so they're your basic secondary modes. So you're probably thinking, okay, 4 clicks must get to these mini ones. No, 4 clicks is a battery voltage check. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will flash out the battery, but not as a percentage. It's going to flash it out as a voltage. So I'll show you. Hang on. So hang on. We'll get it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 3.6 volts. So it's going down a little bit. So that needs charging. So it does it as a voltage. I suppose maybe for the mass market, it may have been better to do it as like, you know, I don't know, 1 flash for 25%, 2 flashes for 50, 4 for 40. I don't know. But for a flashaholic, we understand what that means. You're looking at 4.1, 4.2 volts for full charge, and then it'll dissipate downwards from there. It's very handy to have a battery check on it and a light this small as well. I really appreciate that. Although other companies choose to do it on other methods with momentary flashes and things like that. Okay, so 5 is E-lockout, and again you get this Toys R Us mode. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So flash, 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 flash. Everything flashes like a, you know, some sort of psychedelic thunderstorm, and then it will not function. So great, E-lockout is handy. It means it's not going to get leaned on in a pocket like that, and the light isn't going to come on and waste all the battery. Fantastic. And then to turn that off, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bang. I don't know why you need all of this, but it's like, you know, attacking a Dalek or something, but it certainly makes it apparent as to what's going on. So after that, you're back to normal again. Okay, so 6 is the micro auxiliary LED flashes. So I'll show you that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see there how they flash, and they go through like a pattern. So there's like green, there's blue, and then a blue flash, then red strong, then a momentary red, then blue. So interesting. I was a little bit, and then there's almost a violet there. I was a little bit disappointed in the run times on this. I fully charged it, then I left this for about 3 hours, and it drained the battery more than I expected. I was hoping this would drain it just a minuscule amount because these are really small, but I suppose there is 3 and they're quite bright for their size. I would have, you know, I'm expecting too much from such a small cell basically, but it's another handy feature, and if you had that hanging on something as a marker, it's brilliant and it works and it looks good. I really like it, and it's an extra feature, and it's certainly not taking up any unwanted space or making it too bulky anyway. So you can still use the light normally, but that doesn't turn off, you see. As soon as it goes back to off mode, that goes back on. So to get rid of that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you're back to normal. You see, that's off. It also has 7 clicks, and which I don't understand, and I'll show you. 7 clicks factory reset. I don't understand why you need to factory reset this. Bear in mind, you can't change anything. What is it that you're resetting? I don't know what that's for. I haven't got a clue. All I can presume is maybe it gets you out of issues where it's doing something weird. I don't know. Maybe stick it in the comments if you can work it out, because I couldn't work it out. Anyway, it's there. Okay, so let's talk about pros and cons. So first pro, cheap, under 20 bucks with a ramping UI and 90 plus CRI. Brilliant. I think that's fantastic, and it's got all these secondary modes. I think that's good. The CRI alone is a lovely feature. 2 tint options, so nobody can complain. Nobody can say I want it warm, and other people saying, well, I want it white. Okay, you're both catered for there. No, there's no excuse in that regards. Brilliant. It's got E-lockout, ramping UI, fantastic. The SST20 gives you quite a bit of throw. In fact, what we'll do is I'll move this down. I'll bring up a picture for you. Okay, right. Okay, so let's look at this picture. So we've got the Astrolux, the Jetbeam, the Rovivon, Nightcore, and X-Tar. So let's look. We'll look at the K2 first. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a hot spot in the middle there, and an okay amount of spill. Now bear in mind, all these photographs are what's called a timed exposure. So this isn't what it would look like if you were to look at it using it outside. This is a 2-second timed exposure. I held each light at exactly the same position, pointing in exactly the same direction. I did the exposure for exactly the same time. I was trying to be as fair as possible to get a decent representation. The reason I used a timed exposure is it allows more light into the lens, which in turn allowed me to show you the beam better. It's a better representation in regards to the beam's type anyway. So with the Astrolux, you can see it's a warm tint there. That tree that's probably the most accurate representation of the tree. Out of all the pictures, that's the only one where the tree actually looks brown at the top there, which it's supposed to, and the bridge was brown wood as well, and it's supposed to look like that. It was more accurate. So I would say it was the more accurate out of them, but that goes without saying, because it's got a high color rendering index. That's to be expected, and it's got quite a neutral tint to it. Okay, so let's look at the Jetbeam Mini One. Now I would argue the Jetbeam Mini One is brighter. Now I'm basing that on the fact that the plants to the right, they're all illuminated, all of them. There's, right to the left, that's a little bit brighter. Although you might notice, in fact, what we'll do is we'll zoom into the bridge on both the Astrolux and the Jetbeam Mini One. Okay, right, we're zoomed in. Now, can you see that on the Astrolux K2, you can see that tree on the bank of the opposite side of that river, you can see it quite clearly, whereas it's less clear on the Jetbeam Mini one. That's because the Jetbeam Mini one doesn't have as much throw. But you've got to ask yourself, do you want more throw, or do you want more overall light close by? You could argue, well, the Jetbeam Mini one's better because it's a keychain light. You're not after throw. Who cares what's going on in the distance? But then there's the other end of that argument, which is, well, what happens if your dog runs off and you're trying to find him in the dark and he's in the distance? You want more throw. You really need to think about those yourself, okay? Those two things are something you need to consider. I know I got a lot of stick from people on the beam versus beam video I did, where people said, whinged and complained, and those people accusing each other of being shills and things like that. I just take this data and I tell you what I'm saying. It depends. None of these lights are rubbish. I think all these lights are great, but some are better at other things and some are better at others. In this regards, I think the K2 has a better colour rendering index, and I think you get a better throw. But if you want more lumens, a lot more lumens from the Jetbeam Mini one, which is still great as well, you're not going to get as much throw, but it's better up close, you could argue, because it's brighter. You need to make that decision. And in regards to the other ones, the X-Tar looks quite bright, but I would argue the beam, it doesn't seem to have a hot spot, but it seems to have a mid spot, for want of a better term, but it certainly doesn't throw. I think that throws slightly less able than the Mini one in my tests, but it was quite a white tint anyway. And the Night Court Tiki is one of the, I would say that's the second best in regards to how that scene should look. You can see the wood is getting towards a brown there. Throw, brilliant. In fact, the throw looks brighter, slightly brighter, but it is a whiter tint, and it will appear that way than the K2. I think it looks brighter as well, even though they're at a similar level. But again, that's an artifact of a different tint. But again, I think the Tiki and the K2 are very similar in that regard. Rovivon A8 does a great job. It almost has a tiny rosiness to it, which I like. But you need to look at these and make your own decisions. But I'm just pointing out what I'm seeing there. Okay, so we'll get rid of that picture there. Right, that's gone. Boosh. Okay, so we've discussed throw and things like that. This is a Type C, and we know it is a Type C on here, and it's also Type C to C, which is brilliant. Everything works great, and it charges, and you can use it whilst it's charging. I really think they've done a decent job. You've got a quick access to the low mode. Now, cons wise, there doesn't seem to be a quick access to turbo. I mean, you've got a quick access when it's on, double click, but there's no quick way to get to the turbo. It's only 300 lumens. You could argue that's a con, because things like the Jetbeam are a lot higher than that. But as you've seen from the beam shot, it depends, because this is giving me, even though it's less lumens, you're getting better throw. So do you want better superfluous light, or surrounding peripheral light, or do you want a little bit more throw? I had this thought myself between the Jetbeam and the Tiki. I carry the Tiki, the non-glow-in-the-dark version, even though the Jetbeam is more lumens. And the same can be said for this. The Jetbeam is more lumens than this, although this has a nicer looking beam. So it depends what trade-off are you willing to make. I think the button was hard to find in the dark. I noticed that a few times. I got used to it to a degree, but I still wasn't happy with it. Can't go straight to turbo. Now, the biggest con for me, and I'm so sorry to have to bring this up, this damn button, and it's not just that it isn't recessed or whatever, it's awful. Right, I hate to do this because I like this light, but I have to be honest, and I doubt a lot of people are going to mention this, but in regards to buttons, let's quickly go over this. Right, Rovivon button, beautiful, nice and smooth, on, off, no problems. Right, Night Court Tiki, pretty good, although I would argue the Jetbeam's slightly better. It's got more travel, and it's better, and it just feels better. So I think the Jetbeam Mini one has the best button. The Tiki has a decent, really good button, not as good as the Jetbeam. The Rovivon around the same as that, and the button's okay on the T1. I don't dislike it. It's functionable, but the button on this is irritating. Watch. If you have this in a certain position, I'll just turn that light off there. There you go. If you have this in a certain position, it's irritating, because let's say you don't have it at an ideal angle. When I try and do double click, so let's try and get to E-lock, which is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was able to do it that time. There are times when you can't do that. The problem is there's not enough travel. Watch. It's that's off, and then watch. Nothing, 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 then on. There's no real travel to the button, and it just, there's no feedback until it's pressed, and then sometimes it's done. It's not wide enough, so if you don't have it perfectly in the middle, it doesn't actuate sometimes. And then, put it this way, I found this a little bit irritating. It's the one thing that's putting me off taking this and putting it on my keychain to replace the tiki. I wish this button wasn't how they've done it. And I realise I may get stick in the comments from people saying, I own one of these, what do you think you're doing slagging this light off? I have to be honest, I did not like the button. I've sat and I've used these many times. In my personal opinion, I think that's a downfall of this light. This damn button, it's not big enough. It doesn't protrude so you can find it. There's no travel on it. It's just muggy. I don't know how to explain it. It's muggy. There's no, I can't get used to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see, I was okay there, but sometimes there I was only able to do 4 that time. And I mean, I'm really hammering it here because I'm doing a review and I don't want to get it all wrong, but in normal usage, and if you haven't got it perfectly on, sometimes you can't get it. I don't want to belabor the point, but I didn't like the button, so I am going to mark it down for that. I have to be honest, it's as simple as that. That is my opinion. I didn't like the button, even though I like the light. Okay, so let's give this a mark out of 10. So, cheap ramping UI, 2 tint options, color rendering index of at least 90. It's got E-lock out, it's got all these extra modes. It's got brilliant throw from the SST20, Type C, works when it's charging, Type C to C. I mean, yes, it's only 300 lumens, but I think that's enough. And I can't really slag it off for that. Bear in mind, I love the Tiki, and that's also 300. Button's a little bit hard to find in the dark. This button lets it down. I was going to give this a, let's have a think. I wanted to give this a 9, at least a 9. But I'm going to have to give it an 8.5 because that button is just a letdown for me. I want to give it an 8, but I think that'd be very unfair. And if people see that alone and don't watch the review, they're going to think I'm just being stupid. So I'm going to have to give it an 8.5. That's my honest score. And I'm sorry to have to do that because at Astrolux, you came so close here. I think you did a fantastic job. But this button, I don't know what you were thinking. I don't know whether that was just death by committee or you did that at the last minute. It's just the worst part of this light. But if you're willing to take a chance and you think, well, do you know what? I think Trailtrek's an idiot. I'm still going to get it. You will like this light, just in basic stuff. But if you're using a lot of the double, you could argue, Trailtrek, you're an idiot because you either turn it on or off. Who cares about whether you can do 16 presses or not? Yes, I agree. You're right there. You don't always have to do multiple millions of things. But bear in mind, E-lockout is 5 clicks away. You are going to be doing a lot of clicks if you want to use the E-lockout. So come on. It took a lot of getting used to that. You have to really hammer it. It's one of the... Okay, 8.5, I think that's fair. Okay, so what I've done is I've tested it against, and I'll show you. I tested against all these lights. I'll just briefly touch on them before we go outside. I tested against something nice and small like the Mech Army X4S, I think it is. I'll show you there. X4S, like this. It's only got 2 modes though. You've got low and then high, but it's very small, and it's waterproof to a degree anyway with charging there. And you can also change the little battery in this. Look, none of these others you can change the battery, but look, there's a 10180 in there, tiny little thing. Look there. So rechargeable lithium ion 10180. So that's quite interesting. Although you could argue that these days changeable batteries and keychain lights seems to be becoming a thing of the past. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, you can make the choice. So I tested against that. I also tested against the Night God Tiny. I think this is 380 lumens. Pretty bright. I've always thought this has a nice beam, and it's using the TIR, but this is slightly different from these TIRs in that it has a micro lensed look. But again, I like that light because I've given a few of those as gifts and I've never had problems. I also checked it against the tube. This is an old classic. I'm not the biggest fan, but I don't want to have a go because I know a lot of people use it. What I don't like is you get light leak straight back in your eyes there, unless you put your thumb over it like that. But then it's less ergonomic. But people would argue, you don't need loads of lumens. You're right, you don't need loads of lumens. Sometimes you do, though, if your dog runs off or you hear a burglar at the back of the house or you want more lumens. But I understand for most people you don't, and a tube's fine. Very cheap, very thin and small, not very bulky, and you can recharge it as well. You can see the battery inside there with the internals there. So night core tube. I checked it against the old tip. This is about 360 lumens. Great. This uses like a frosted optic here. Had no problems with this. These are great, but they're quite bulky in comparison. I mean, look, you could argue that's coming towards double the size, isn't it? And you're not getting as much lumen. Well, I mean, this is 300 lumens and that's slightly more, but this, you don't get tint choices with this. This is metal, this is plastic, this doesn't glow in the dark, this has a clip, this doesn't, you know, there's little good and bad points. I checked it against the Rovivon A8. A lot of secondary modes, very similar design. No problems with this other than it does have pulse width modulation. Go to my review to check out what that issue is, because it flickers basically. Jetbeam Mini One. I like this, really nice light. I like the button, it's one of the best buttons. The secondary modes are brighter than most of the other lights. It puts out a lot, it's very good. Good, decent light, but it doesn't have as much throw as these two. So the Tiki, Nightcore Tiki here, this is the glow-in-the-dark version, and the K2. So the Tiki has a lot more throw and a slightly better tint than the other ones, although this has the best tint, I would argue. It's nice, but you get choices of tints. So, like I say, 8.5, I think they've done a decent job. Well done, Astrolux, for all the goodness you've done. But please, can you release a version 2 and change this button? Please, 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 I'm begging you. Because if you did that, I would get rid of my Nightcore Tiki and I would stick this on. That's all you got to do. So please, I'm begging, I'm praying. Okay, 8.5, enough of me waffling. I'm sorry this went on so long. Let's get outside. I've done loads of comparisons, side by sides. I spent a lot of time outdoors in the middle of nowhere, away from any sort of lights. And I'll do my best to show you how these work. So, right, I'm off. Bye-bye.